We move to pass over this article.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to pass over Article 58. Do you want to explain?
Yes,
your
we
motion?
move over to, we would like to pass over this article because two different articles were drafted and the planning board recommends that we support the other option, which is Article 60.
Finance Committee's recommendation.
Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends passing over Article 58. Any discussion on passing over Article 50? Oh, I'm sorry, Planning Board's recommendation, sorry.
Planning Board recommends passing over as well.
Planning Board recommends passing over Article 58. Any discussion on passing over, meaning we take no action? Because we're not changing the zoning bylaw, this is a simple majority vote and not a two-thirds vote. All those in favor of passing over Article 58, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
20.
Article 20. Proposed by the Board of Water Commissioners.
Richard Clark, Chairman of the Commissioners. I move that the town vote to transfer from the Water Department retained earnings a sum of $560,000 for the principal payment of the water tower pending and repair debt, and to transfer from the Water Department retained earnings a sum of $7,539 for the interest on this same debt.
We have a motion and a second. Article 20. Do you want to explain your article?
Well, we don't want to shock anybody, but we're going to try to save some money on this. We just, rather than keep paying the interest on this debt, we have the money to pay it off, and we just want to make it go away. Just pay the debt off.
Works good. Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on the transfer of money on Article 20 as stated? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 20 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimous.
33.
Article 33, proposed by the Municipal School Building Committee. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from Article 12 of the May 9th, 2016 special town meeting aerial man lift for the sum of $3,200 to purchase pump staging for the building repair work.
We have a motion and a second. Article 33. Do you want to speak to the article?
Scott Materna, Building Maintenance. We have a man lift, articulating man lift. It can't always reach places that the pump staging can. We have pump staging currently, but it's wood. And if any contractor knows, you go up and down that a couple times and it starts to slip and then you drop. And sometimes it's a surprise and it's not safe. So this is to buy a brand new system, all aluminum. We looked at rentals. By the time we rent it for a big project, you could have bought it. So we're looking to buy some.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee's recommendation, Article 33.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on the, Article 33? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 33 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
32.
32. Article 32 is again a Building Committee motion. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from undesignated fund balance the sum of $45,000 and transfer $5,000 from Article 10 of the special town meeting of May 13, 2013 animal control van to repair and replace the HVAC units at the police station.
We have a motion and second. Article 32.
Scott Materna, Building Maintenance. This is to replace 5 gas-fired rooftop HVAC units. They total 18 tons of heating and cooling for the police station. They've been recommended for several years to be replaced. They're not getting any better. The repair cost is starting to add up. The new price includes, the prices we've been getting includes all the materials, labor, a crane. We were looking at doing it over several years, but by the time we bring everybody back and everything starts to change. It's easier to do it now.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee's recommendation.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends Article 32. Any discussion on Article 32 is presented? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimous.
36.
Article 36 is proposed by the Highway Surveyor.
I move that the town vote to transfer $590 from Article 50, May 11, 2015, Annual Town Meeting, Recycle Center windows, and $8,910 from Solid Waste Recycling, retained earnings, for the sum of $9,500 for the purchase, installation of compactor, including any necessary materials or equipment for the recycle center.
Motion is second, Article 36. Do you want to speak to the article?
Yeah, Sue got us a couple grants 2 years in a row here, and it's to buy a compactor, and we need the money to put the pad and electrical work, basically.
Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation on Article 36.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 36 is presented? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 36 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
56, 56.
Article 56. Proposed by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Milius.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to approve Article 56 as presented in the warrant.
We have a motion and a second on Article 56. Mr. Milius, do you want to speak to it?
Sure. I'll try to do this quickly. Basically, when we instituted zoning for alternative energy systems, we excluded the I-2. The I-2 is industrial 2, and we did that because at the time it was the site of the BFI landfill on the Bridgewater, East Bridgewater line. We used to call it Mount Halifax years ago. I'm sure you've all seen some portion of it. We're looking to change that because we're having some issues in that we have some solar projects being presented for the landfill area, which would include Halifax and Bridgewater. They're currently filling in between now. When we first zoned this as a no for alternative energy in the industrial 2 zone, the real concern was windmills. Solar panels had not come into any kind of widespread use at that time. They were cost prohibitive. So the fear was that somebody might want to try to put a windmill on top of the landfill, which probably would not have been a particularly attractive site. But based on that and the fact that there are other alternatives now, in particular solar, we thought it was a good opportunity to try to, well, it's a money grab is what it is, to try to put some area that's otherwise useless into some use.
Okay, Finance Committee's recommendation on Article 56. Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, Planning Board's recommendation. Got to do them first.
Planning Board recommends.
Thank you. Finance Committee's recommendation.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 56 as presented? Seeing no evidence thereof, again, this is a zoning change. I'll try to hear a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of Article 56 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
48.
3-8?
48.
I'm sorry, 48. Article 48 is proposed by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Milius.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to sell a property owned by the town designated as Assessor's Map 37, Parcel A, measuring 17.65 acres to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game.
We have a motion and a second to sell some property under Article 48. Mr. Milius, your article?
I could do an hour on this, but I'm not gonna. Don't get nervous. Basically, what's going on here is that about, I don't know, 16 years ago maybe, the former owners of the large parcel known as Bog 18 off of Elm Street here in Halifax decided to sell. Fisheries and, well, at the time I think it was Fisheries and Game, right? Purchased it. So basically what happened was Fisheries and Game and our great and illustrious Commonwealth decided to avoid paying the rollback tax because we had been giving an agricultural exemption to the owners at the time. So when we found out what was going on, we pressed, and we did come to some kind of agreement, although it took about 3 years. We managed to get some monies and some land. I believe it was $250,000 initially. Yes, I'm getting a confirmation of that. And after 12 or 13 years of fighting for it, we actually got some land, 17.65 acres. Unfortunately, it was pretty much useless to us because of the way it was gerrymandered. Along comes Fisheries and Game, and they asked us if they could use the property. So I said, so that's like selling it and still having it, right? Giving it away and still having it. So very graciously, their new representative worked out a compromise with the Commonwealth whereby we can get $250,000 for land that we basically can't use. So I am very much in support of this. It's been a 16-year project. If anybody wants to spend an hour sometime, I'd like to go over all the particulars with you, but definitely not here tonight.
Finance Committee's recommendation on Article 48.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 48? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 7. Article 7. Article 7 is proposed by the Board of Selectmen. Mrs. Roy.
All right, let me turn the page. Okay. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $14,653 to fund the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement for fiscal year 2019 between IAFF Local 3159, the firefighters, and the town of Halifax.
We have a motion to second Article 7. Do you want to speak to this?
Yes,
Mrs.
this article will fund the 2% increase for our firefighters.
Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation, Article 7.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 7? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 7 as presented say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 11. Article 11, proposed by the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr.
I
Gannon.
move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,358 to fund the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement for the fiscal year 2019 between the police chief, Edward Brogger, and the town of Halifax.
We have a motion and a second on Article 11. Mr. Guerin, do you want to speak to it?
This is the same 2% that has been given to other town employees. It was just chief agreed upon this.
Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation.
Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 11? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 10. Article 10. Article 10 is proposed by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Guerin.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $13,773 to fund the provision of the collective bargaining agreement for fiscal 2019 between the Halifax Association of Police Patrolmen and the town of Halifax.
A motion is second on Article 10. Mr. Guerin, do you want to speak to it?
As before, this is the 2% that would fund the 2% increase in pay.
Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation.
Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 10? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 10 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 30. Article 3. Article. 3-0. I'm sorry? 3-0. Sorry, couldn't be Article 3. Article 30, proposed by the School and Municipal Building Committee. Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from undesignated funds balance the sum of $21,700 to repair and replace 3 garage doors at the highway barn.
The motion is second on Article 30. School committee, building committee?
Scott Materna, Building Maintenance. The doors we're replacing, repairing and replacing, there's 2 that need to be widened, right? Currently, they're only 3 inches wider than the plows that drive into them, and they do drive into them. So it's damaging the building, and that needs to be addressed. So this will allow 2 wider doors. They can drive straight through the building without driving through the building, and it'll fix 1 other door. So-
Okay, good. Finance Committee's recommendation?
Finance
Article
Committee
30.
recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 30? All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 55, number 55. Proposed by the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator,
Mrs. Roy.
I move that Article 55 as presented in the warrant.
I'm sorry, presented in the warrant. Article 55 is presented in the warrant. We have a motion and a second. Do you want to speak to the article?
I'm going to defer to our town administrator.
Mr. Seelig.
I'm just going to first apologize that we're going to be discussing a very technical amendment at 11 o'clock at night. And it's going to sound like a lot of inside baseball. A number of years ago, after Twin Lakes and Halifax Meadows were built, the town wanted at that time to prevent other developments along those lines from happening. And what it did was, at that time, put in as part of the zoning bylaw, a stipulation that in a multifamily development, each structure had to be on a separate lot. What that did was highly discourage any attempt to have similar developments go into place. Because if you're either doing apartments or you're doing condos, a developer's way of doing things is to put all the structures on one large lot, like Twin Lakes, like Halifax Meadows. Obviously, that type of way of building, a way of developing a property makes sense if you have one owner. Obviously, for condos, you've got separate owners for the units, but the condo association ends up owning the land underneath the buildings. What we've run into is recently having developments come in and having to try and say, okay, we want to allow developments like this into town, but at the same time, we've got a stipulation in there that makes it a practical impossibility to put something like in that. Halifax Trails, for example, is one of those. There's other problems with Halifax Trails, but trying to develop a piece of property for a multifamily development with this stipulation makes it very difficult. The proposals from the Board of Selectmen is to, in fact, eliminate the requirement of having individual lots for each building. Right now, if you leave that in there, what it encourages, in fact, is one large building rather than a number of smaller ones, because the developer says, well, if I can only have one building on one lot, I'm going to make it as big as I can, given the other stipulations that are in the bylaw. This way, you can have something a little bit more orderly, such as what we have at Halifax Meadows or at Twin Lakes. There's a lot of pros and cons about multifamily development aside from that. And some of them probably going to come up tonight. But that's why we're doing it, is to make this a more doable situation for the development of land in town. I don't have any personal interest in any property. I don't own any property. I'm not associated with any property. I'm trying to work with the building inspector to try and come up with solutions when we're running into bylaws that really don't make a lot of sense. And when we had the hearing with the planning board a couple weeks ago, planning board members said, yes, we put this in here simply to prevent developments from happening. If the town wants to continue to go that direction, then obviously that's a decision for the town to make. But this way, at least you have a choice in the matter.
Planning Board's recommendation?
Planning Board does not recommend. It was a 2-2 vote.
Okay. Finance Committee's recommendation?
Finance Committee does not recommend.
Finance Committee does not recommend. Mr. Andrews, he's speaking as a private citizen.
Gordon Andrews, 244 Elm Street. So the major concern that I have with this is we're removing all the requirements for the buildings. If you're allowing this development to take place on a driveway, what's the maximum length of the driveway? What's the frontage requirement? Where are these requirements in the bylaws? Because they're not here. They're under subdivision control. So if you remove this, you're going to remove all that control. You saw the development like Blackledge off of Franklin Street. That's going to go through. Developments like that will be able to go through because they'll be able to put all those buildings on a single lot and there'll be no control over that.
Okay. Any further discussion on Article 55? Yes, sir. Mr. Diaz.
Alan Diaz, Snow Street. I disagree with the previous speaker. I think subdivision control is the mechanism to have a residential development. Multifamily development typically is a single lot with so many units, depending on how many the town wants it. I think Halifax requires 10 acres and 1 unit per acre. So this is the correct mechanism. The language in this particular bylaw has created issues because in order for it to be on a lot, it should be under subdivision control. And that's not the intent of the law.
Okay. I think Mr. Andrews in the back.
Gordon Andrews, 688 Plymouth Street. I've been on the planning board for 21 years. What we've seen is people come in and our subdivision control laws are what has kept our town where it is. The previous speaker said that the intent should be for them to come in and put it all on one lot. That's great, but there is no provisions in that bylaw to mandate how that is done. You could take 100 acres, you could put all those houses anywhere. There is no regulation on the length of the road because it's not a road, it's a driveway. I mean, in our bylaws, we have no shared driveways. You're saying that you're going to take out all of those regulations that we have and you say, we're not going to have another subdivision before this town. Everybody's going to come in and say, you know what, I don't need subdivision control. All I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to put these houses anywhere where I want, and we're not going to get the control that we have now.
Are you speaking in favor or opposed?
I'm speaking against.
Against, thank you. Mrs. Nolan?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, can you tell me if the multifamily developments require a special permit in all zones, all zoning regions, and if they require a site plan review?
Can you answer that? Mr. Seeley?
Don't worry, I'm not reading the whole thing. The short answer is, in those areas where it's allowed, it's only allowed by special permit. And it does require going through site plan review as part of the site plan section of the zoning bylaw. And I'll disagree with one of the previous speakers. It's clear to me, obviously I'm in disagreement with them, or I wouldn't be saying I was in disagreement, that, for instance, there's a frontage requirement for this use also. There are other stipulations for a multifamily development, such as the 10 acres. But where we have a table in the bylaw that says, for instance, how far away from street a building has to be and how large a parcel you need to have, those are in that section of the bylaw. Then there are exceptions. They specifically lay out those exceptions. And there's no exception about the minimum frontage of 150 feet for a multifamily development.
Mr. Hayward. Mr. Hayward in the front. Did you have your hand up? Mr. Andrews, I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Moderator, currently, right now, there's an issue before the court that the zoning board and the building inspector have decided that there is no frontage requirement for a multifamily. And that's the court case that's going forward regarding this. They have said in the meeting and determined there is no frontage. I agree with Mr. Seelig that the zoning bylaw table of dimensions calls that out. There's a disagreement there. But there's no guarantee that that's going to be held. There's no guarantee what the length of the backlot is going to be, how far away the homes can be. Site plan review, they have the ability to review it, but they don't have the ability to turn it down in most cases because of the way that Massachusetts law has been written. They have the ability to review it, but they really don't have the ability to turn it down.
Okay. Ma'am, in the back, you haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
Kimberly King, 441 Twin Lakes
You
Drive.
might have to come a little closer so we can hear you.
Kimberly King, 441 Twin Lakes Drive. It doesn't take many acres to add to the enrollment of our schools if we were to allow this to pass. So my question would be to how is this going to affect our schools, our enrollment? How is it going to affect our school system financially? And my second question would be to everyone who works for the town in EMS and Public Works. How is it going to affect them financially? Have we looked into this? Has there been a study done for those things?
We'll try and find out. I don't know who can address that.
I'll try and answer the questions first, then make a different comment. For instance, for Twin Lakes and for Halifax Meadows, our highway department doesn't maintain those roads. So there's no additional expense for the town for road. If you're at Twin Lakes, somebody else is doing the plowing of Twin Lakes, not the town. Same thing with Halifax Meadows as an example. If there's a pothole, it's the owners association that handles that, not the town of Halifax. For police and fire, we don't do an individual study for each development. So for instance, if we had a regular subdivision and we have several ongoing here in Halifax, part of the permitting process is not that we determine how many more students will be there because of that particular subdivision, or do we need an additional firefighter, or how many more calls, ambulance calls we're going to have. We don't go through that process because it's an allowable use. But for multifamily, they have to go through the special permitting process. If you remember, we were talking about special permits and the fact that you have a public hearing, that the abutters are notified, that there's advertisement in the paper, that it requires a supermajority of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And the Zoning Board of Appeals can, in fact, place stipulations on there as to many of the concerns the previous speakers have met. Again, we're trying to reduce the incongruities of the bylaws in the town, and this is an attempt to do so.
Mr. Andrews, and then Mrs. Troop, and then in the front here, Mrs. Spaulding.
You know, one of the things here is, we're just going to go into the bylaw and we're going to rip out a paragraph. That has effects on the whole bylaw. And my suggestion is to not pass taking out that paragraph now, but do a study over it in the next year and come back here with something comprehensive that makes sure that we take care of all those issues. Just ripping out a paragraph is not the way to do this.
Okay? Yes?
Amy Troop, Hillside Ave. I wanted to ask, what is the required frontage for a single family? And what is the required acreage for a single residential family? And why did we put those in place? back in the day to prevent overcrowding. So why are we going to reverse it now?
Try and find out for you. Does anyone have an answer?
Well, I cannot answer for the Halifax residents of the 1960s or later than that. I wasn't here for that. But in general, in fact, when you set up frontage and when you set up acreage requirements, you're looking at how you want your town to be, the type of environment, how close buildings are going to be to each other and such. You have more you may have more densely packed areas. You may have areas of less density. Some of that is going to be determined, for instance, on the soils and such that you have in various areas, whether it's in Halifax or in other places. We've gone by the 40,000 square foot standard for a single home with 150 feet of frontage for a long time, certainly before my time here. You'd have to ask the people at that time why they made that decision for those amounts. One note, a previous speaker talked about let's do a study. That'd be good. Certainly the planning board should have an interest in doing that. The Citizen Trainer Planning Collaborative mentions one of the responsibilities of the planning board is in fact to constantly review the town's zoning bylaws and to come back to town meeting with proposals. If they're going to be doing so, I'm all for it, whether it's on this issue or others. I'm not sure whether the planning board is intending to do that. I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think you were next, and then in the back.
Summer Smelling, Indian Path Road. I just wanted to make a comment. There was mention of the effect on the school system, and it hasn't really been addressed. So I've served on the school committee for about 4 years now, and we've seen an increasing kindergarten class every year. They're not getting any smaller. They're teetering on about 100 kids a grade right now. We have grants that are given to our town because we're a small rural community that we are in jeopardy of losing because we are growing at a increasing pace. And I'm not going to speak for or against the article, but I'm just saying that in terms of the school population, I would assume that if we allow for multifamily developments, that it would increase our population, which is already increasing on its own and is jeopardizing some of the grants that we have. And I personally like the fact that my kid is in a classroom of 20 kids and not 40. So that's my take.
In the front, and then Mrs. Troop again. Yep. Mm-hmm. Here we go.
Alexander Mead, South Street. I agree with Mr. Moderator. I agree with the previous speaker regarding our school. I don't want to say reaching capacity, but we have seen a pretty steady increase in enrollment year after year. Also, a previous speaker had mentioned that while the driveways of these developments are paid for by whether they're associations or private entities, whatever it may be, that's all well and good. But the highway surveyor earlier tonight came forth and asked for $150,000 to try and fix some of our roads. The cars that are coming down those driveways and eventually coming onto public roads, they're not going to help at all. That's all.
Are you speaking in favor of this or against it?
I am speaking against.
Thank you. Okay. No? Yes? Mm-hmm. Well, let her go, then you, then Mr. Bosari.
Kimberly King, 441 Twin Lakes. Yes, it's true that the highway department may not plow our roads. However, the water department does come down and help us with our water mains. They have helped when there's water breaks. The town's taxes may not pay for materials and such. EMS, fire helps us, the police department helps us, and our kids do go. Increasing to it without doing a little more homework, I don't think is the right step for Halifax to take at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Then Mr. Bosari.
It's kind of another point that I've already made. I just was going to say I think that the required frontage to have a retreat lot is 50 feet, and the required frontage to have a street is 150 feet. I think that we should stick to that to keep our, we need to have room for animals to, live, birds and deer. They're all getting crouched. Like, we did this in the 60s to protect ourselves from being overpopulated. I think we should remember that going forward.
Mr. Bossari.
Dan Basari, 175 Aldana. I'll try to be quick. I'm on the zoning board, so I'm speaking in that capacity. I was at a lot of these meetings, and the first thing, and this is to speak to even the previous speaker and a few others, there's a marked difference between a subdivision and a multifamily, it's late, multifamily development. Subdivisions are individual houses. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're talking about apartments and condominiums. Now, if there's a 10-acre lot, it's not going to affect the school size because the builder can come in and say, okay, I'm going to put in, I have a 10-acre lot. The law says I can only do 1 unit per acre. I'm going to build a giant 10-unit building. You're going to have just as many kids as if what we would like to do, which is a better use of the property, but why can't he do 5 2-unit buildings? Much nicer for the town. So, and then to a previous point, so that won't affect the density of the town, how many people in the town. You still can build 1 big building or a few small buildings. I know myself and a few others on the board thought that a few small buildings would be better. The second issue is the whole section on the zoning bylaw, 167.12, talks about the densities and spacings and frontage of multifamily developments, apartments and condominiums. Do I think it needs review, and do I think it needs to be refined more? Yes, but I'm 100% in agreement with this change because that would be the first thing I think zoning bylaw review board would do. I think that's going to happen anyway eventually. So this is a very good change. But and going forward, we have to remember that when you talk about setback lots and single-family homes and multifamily development and subdivisions, that doesn't apply here. We have to keep in mind multifamily developments. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Andrews.
So when this issue went before the zoning board for a previous development, the zoning board's attorney that the town has paid for says that the law does make sense. You have to have a 10-acre parcel, and you have to be able to put each building on a separate lot. So the requirement for a subdivision in town is 110 feet. You can easily, if you have 150 feet, you can easily make the 110 feet subdivision requirement. So it's not a burden on the developer to put in the subdivision and put each building on a separate lot.
Okay. Seeing Mr. Andrews.
I'd just like to reference back to a previous speaker who asked if the planning board plans on reviewing this. The planning board does plan on reviewing more than one bylaw, but the intent of the people from the town coming forward and creating a need for this is the first thing. I don't think it's the job of the board to come in here and rip apart the bylaw without having people from the town itself expressing an interest that they want something. So, I mean, we're going to have discussion at the planning board. I welcome everybody to come in and voice their opinion, but it's very difficult to get anybody to even respond in town about any of the bylaws. So definitely, I mean, the selectmen have put out a notice looking for people to join the bylaw study committee. I don't know if you've had any response or not, but you know, I've been on the bylaw study committee in the past, and it's basically just been a couple of board members, maybe a selectman. So the body that's sitting here right now, if they have an interest in it, come forward.
Okay.
But I would suggest that we take a look at the whole bylaw and not just pick it apart. It makes more sense to take a look at it and see how it's going to affect the whole town.
This, seeing no evidence of further debate, this requires a two-thirds vote to make this change. I'll try to hear a two-thirds vote. All those in favor of Article 55 as proposed, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails. Next article. 43. Article 43. Is proposed by the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Moderator?
Mrs. Roy.
Oh, hang on. 43. Hang on. I move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $1,000. I'm sorry.
I think it's a raise and appropriate.
I'm sorry. I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,000 to repair and replace the parking lot light in the Holmes Public Library Hops Playground parking lot.
We have a second? We have a motion and a second on Article 43. Do you want to speak to the article?
Yes, that parking lot is extremely dark, and it's very hard for patrons when they're leaving at night to walk, and we're very concerned that somebody's going to fall and hurt themselves. So we would like to be able to put additional lighting in that parking lot.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Article 43. Any further discussion on Article 43? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 43 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. 6-0? Oh, 16. Article 16. Proposed by the Highway Surveyor. Two left?
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $178,850 from undesignated fund balance and $7,150 from Article 18, large dump truck of May 8, 2017 annual town meeting to purchase and equip a Peterbilt Model 348 or equivalent with a hookless system to replace the 706 Sterling 2003 for the Highway Department.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on Article 16. Do you want to speak to your article?
Yeah, I really don't want to buy another big truck because normally you want to spread them out when you buy these. We just bought one last year, and the problem is 706 is so deteriorated that we need to buy a new truck for it, replace it.
Okay.
The Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any further discussion on Article 16 as proposed? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor of Article 16 say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimous. 35. Article 35. Again proposed by the Highway Surveyor.
This is my last one. I move to the town vote to transfer $2,200 from Article 35 of the May 8, 2017 annual town meeting, recycle center garage doors, and $6,200 from the solid waste recycle retained earnings for a sum of $8,400 to purchase, install a swap shed with shelving at the recycle center.
Second.
A motion and a second on Article 35. Do you want to speak to it?
The swap shop that is up at the recycle center right now is another thing falling apart, and I talked to the school today, as a matter of fact, and I wanted to try to get them to do it. It would have been cheaper, but there's no guarantee they could do it before spring, and we don't know if the building's going to make it that long.
Okay.
Finance Committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends Article 35. Any discussion on Article 35? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. 59. Article 59.
Mr. Moderator,
Mrs. Roy.
I move that the article as printed.
Article,
Second.
we have a motion and a
This is the
second
one.
on Article 59. Do you want to speak to the article?
Yeah, Charlie's going to speak to it.
This was another change we were trying to deal with the in-laws. Right now, in-law apartment special permits go with the applicant, not the property. When someone's selling the property, we're indicating that the permit should go with the property when the property is sold, so that if the Jones family gets a special permit for the in-law, when the Smith family buys it, the special permit goes with that property. The Smith family doesn't have to go back into the ZBA to request a new special permit and go through that process again. Again, anytime someone feels that there's a stipulation being violated, whether it's with the Jones family or the Smith family, they'll be able to still contact the zoning enforcement officer.
This requires a planning board recommendation.
Planning board recommends.
Planning board recommends. Finance committee?
Finance
recommends?
committee recommends.
Finance committee recommends. Any further discussion on Article 59? Again, this is a zoning change. It requires a two-thirds vote to pass, so I'll try to hear a two-thirds majority. All those in favor of Article 59, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously.
24.
Article 24. Article 24 is proposed by the Chief of Police, Chief Broderick.
Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to transfer from undesignated fund balance the sum of $80,000 and trade 2 current police vehicles to purchase and equip with miscellaneous police equipment 2 new marked police vehicles to be used for patrol.
Second.
Motion and a second. Do you want to speak to the article, Chief?
Yes, Mr. Moderator, this just stays with the capital plan. Over the past few years, it's been proven out that this actually saves some money with trading the cars. It's decreased my maintenance budget, and the money we get for the trades goes back to the town. So it's worked out for us.
Okay, thank you. Finance Committee's recommendation.
Finance committee recommends.
Finance Committee recommends. Any discussion on Article 24? Seeing no evidence thereof, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
53.
5-3. 55-3.
Is this the last one?
Proposed by,
Robin Maker,
Yes, sir.
27 Cherry Street.
okay.
We're just asking the town moderator to change the town.
Well, you have to make a motion.
I'd like
Do
to
you
make a
wanna-
motion.
Do you want to approve this Article 53 as presented in the warrant? Is that your motion?
Yes, that's the motion.
Okay, do we have a second? We have a motion and a second on Article 53. Mr. Maker, it's your motion. Go ahead.
We'd just like to ask the town to see if we can change and amend Chapter 167.7, the zoning schedule as written.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, fine. Planning Board's recommendation on Article 53.
Planning board recommends.
Planning Board recommends. Finance Committee's recommendation on Article 53.
Finance committee does not recommend.
Finance Committee does not recommend. Do you want to tell us why?
So the finance committee had questions as to whether or not putting this type of establishment in the center of town made sense. There's other issues along with how close to the school and how far away that they have to be from establishments that serve alcohol.
Okay. Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Len Tessino, River Street. As you may or may not know, the town voted in prior years to allow marijuana cultivation and manufacturing in the industrial zone. They also just signed off on a host community agreement with a potential marijuana developer for an industrial zone project. Putting it into the business zone, not only do you get the host community agreement, which allows a payment by the developer to the town on all of the cultivation, manufacturing, and sales, but the town would also get a 3% sales tax that we do not currently get with the industrial zone permitting. So there is if the benefit for the industrial zoning is the financial return, you're actually getting potentially more financial return with the addition of the sales tax for the business.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any further discussion on Article 53? Yes, ma'am.
Paula Hatch, 10 Oak Place. I apologize, I may have understood something. How close would this be to a school?
Can we get an answer from that? Mr. Andrews?
So it needs to be 500 feet away from the property line.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Sarah Nobles, 55 Lincoln Street. Is my understanding that we are currently allowing marijuana establishment in industrial zones? Is that correct? And the previous speaker stated that we wouldn't be allowed to get the 3% sales tax. Is that correct if it's sold in an industrial zone?
This changes it to add the business zone, but Mr. Seelig can.
Correct,
probably
but as
answer
it
that
stands now.
If you have a retail establishment, it doesn't matter what zone it is in it, you can get the 3% sales tax. Industrial, commercial, wherever it is, retail stores for marijuana would be subject to the 3% sales tax. Cultivation and processing and such, it doesn't matter where it is. Again, you only get the community impact fee, no sales tax.
Any further discussion on?
Thank you, Charlie, for clarifying. So I personally see no reason to change what we've got going on now. I think we have a nice little setup, keeping it in the industrial zone. I don't see any reason to move it to the regular business zone. I think if we're going to open up marijuana retail businesses, we should start it in the industrial zone and see how that goes before we just throw it right into the center of town. I appreciate that they're trying to open a business. I'm a retail business owner myself. I get that, but this is the type of business that doesn't need foot traffic. If people want to find it, they will. So I think we should just leave it the way it is, keep it in the industrial zone, and just keep it that way. So I'm not for this bill.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, in the back.
Jonathan Seelig, Stony Way Road. I was just curious if anybody that's looked into this has checked with other municipalities as to pros and cons of this situation. Has anybody, I don't want to say done a study, but kind of looked longer term at this, kind of so we can kind of get a taste of what we might be in for, either positive or negative.
All right, Mr. Seelig, do you want to? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Andrews, yep.
So there's a number of surrounding towns around us that have voted no to allowing the retail establishments. Not even in industrial zones.
Mr. Seelig, if you'd have a seat, I can get you some answers for that. Sure. The other Mr. Seelig's going to, no, him, you got. I want the white-haired guy up front and the guy with the dark beard in the back.
The Finance Committee's correct, Chair is correct. We're one of the few communities on the South Shore that has allowed retail at all in any place. A lot of towns right now either have voted no, period, it's imprinted into their bylaw now, or they're voting moratoria because they wanted a little bit of space to figure out, okay, the regs just came out 2 or 3 months ago from the Cannabis Control Commission. We'll wait till the state gets its act together and starts licensing these facilities before thinking we're going to do zoning for anything, let alone retail. The town made a decision a couple of years ago to allow medical marijuana establishments in the industrial zone. The town then in 2016 was one of the communities that voted for the referendum for recreational marijuana. In 2017, the town voted to allow it in the industrial. And now we have a petition article to allow all the recreational marijuana facilities in the commercial district. So and in terms of the restrictions, it's actually 500 feet from lot line to lot line, which even pushes it a little bit farther away from the school system. Also, it's not just schools, it's almost any child-centric facility. So a child care facility would qualify. And also, right under the current bylaw, there's a 500, again, property line restriction to how close a recreational marijuana facility can be to a pouring establishment, not a package store, but if a restaurant and such, you can't have a recreational marijuana facility within 500 feet of any restaurant or such that has a pouring license for alcohol, whether it's beer and wine or all alcohol.
Mr. Milius.
Mr. Moderator, this is one of those potential quality of life issues that I spoke about earlier, and I think it's important that the Board of Selectmen chime in on this. I want to go back to what a previous speaker said. We do allow it. It's in the industrial zone. I get that part. The 3% still available. Foot traffic is not necessarily a big item for this type of establishment, in my opinion. I think, at least for the time being, and maybe for the foreseeable future, the industrial zone is a good place for this type of establishment. I don't think we need to insert it into our small commercial district at this time. Down the road, we can take another look at it, but I don't think it's the right decision at this time, and I believe my board's in agreement with this. I don't want to speak for everybody immediately, but okay, all right. I am speaking for everybody. That's all I wanted to offer. Thank you.
Mr. Andrews?
I'm not speaking for or against, but I just would like to bring up, even in our industrial zone, we have a child care center down there. So when you go 500 feet around that, that kind of takes that out too.
Okay. Mr. Seelig?
To clarify one thing, industrial zone in Halifax is not just the industrial park. Industrial zone means zoned land that's industrial. It may be right now being used for farm or anything else. But just to clarify, that's not the only place in town. In fact, the growing facility that we've talked about is cited for River Street. And no one would automatically think, oh, River Street, that's an industrial area. But no, it is an industrial zoned area. That's the difference there. Sorry, just wanted to.
This requires a 2/3 vote for approval. Because it's a zoning bylaw change, I'll try to hear a 2/3 majority. Seeing no further evidence of debate, all those in favor of Article 53 as presented say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. It fails. I need a motion by the Board of Selectmen. Yes? Mr. Garrett?
I move that we adjourn to Saturday.
Time certain being
Time certain be Saturday, May
19th
15th.
at 10 o'clock thereon to take up Article 63.
You said it.
We have a second.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Andrews.
I just want to say thank you for your years of service to the town.
Well, thank you very much.